Take it from me. This is what a decade plus of procrastinating on schoolwork and staying up late playing video games does to you. But yeah, it's been a while since the last video. Every single time I want to record a video, I'm always scared because of the way that my computer is acting, that rendering the video is gonna crash my computer, because that's been happening lately. So yeah, whenever I get in the mood to make a video, and I'll have the added anxiety of my computer potentially crashing. So that's fun. We'll see if that happens again. But yeah, originally this video was gonna be me going through the fissure in the Elden Ring DLC and fighting the putrescent knight, because I wanted to talk about the putrescent knight because I think that boss is really cool. But I figured instead it might be fun to actually just talk about all the bosses and my opinions on them, and rank them on a tier list, because that's fun and trendy, I guess. You know, usually channels that are super popular and have been around for a really long time, usually it takes a while for them to devolve into like really low effort content like this. But who's to say that you can't just reach straight to the bottom of the barrel as soon as you get started? Sorry, there's a sock on my microphone. I use it as like a pop filter, and there's a string coming off of it, and it's like annoying the shit out of me. Yeah, I figured that for funsies, I would go through all 26 remembrance bosses. Technically 25 if you want to, you know. I guess technically it's actually 24, because Elden Beast and Radagon count as one, and then Bale is technically not a remembrance boss, but I'm counting them separately and as remembrance bosses, so whatever. Anyways, I figured it'd be fun to go through all of the remembrance bosses in the base game and in the DLC, now that, you know, there's not going to be any more major content added to Elden Ring. And I have these all ordered down here. By the way, I got all these images myself, just off of the internet, and this took way longer to do and organize than I thought it would. And I made my own tier list, because I thought there wasn't one with all the DLC and base game bosses, and then I realized I didn't scroll down far enough and there was one right there. So I'm stupid and I made this for no reason, but you know what, I think mine looks nicer, so meh. But yeah, I have these organized in around the vague order that I think most people would encounter these. Some of them I just threw in because like you can encounter them at any point in the game if you're far enough. But yeah, you also noticed that the list only goes down to C. I say only, just like as a baseline. I don't think there's any particularly bad remembrance bosses. Now there's bad, like, just, you know, a lot of them are just enemies that have boss health bars, or like mini bosses, I guess you'd call them. But yeah, none of those are included in this list. It's just the ones that you get boss souls from. And I'm basically gonna be ranking these off of like, obviously the boss fight in terms of like gameplay, but also the way the boss looks and aesthetically, you know, if I like or dislike them, and also their music, and also the rewards that you get for beating them. But yeah, it only goes down to C because I don't think there's any particularly bad remembrance bosses. You know, it basically goes from like ones that are my personal favorite and I think are amazing, really good bosses, and bosses that I think are good, and bosses that I think are okay, and bosses that I don't particularly care for. And maybe I'll put the link to this tier list in the description of this video, so that if you want to do this yourself, I guess you can go ahead and do that. But yeah, I'm not sure how long this is going to be, so I guess we should just get started. First one, Godric. I remember when I first fought Godric, I had so much trouble dodging his like tornado attacks that he would summon around himself. I thought it was so bullshit, and now it's like, what, like 2 years later, and like every single time I walk into that boss room, he like gets stomped into the dirt, both literally and figuratively. But yeah, I think this is a good baseline for the remembrance bosses in terms of just overall like quality. His moveset isn't too complicated, or he's not too difficult. His voice acting is amazing, and his cutscenes are awesome. His phase 2 transition cutscene is like one of the most memorable things to come out of this entire video game, which is crazy because it's one of the first things that ever happens in it, and it has that much of like a lasting impression on people. His music is pretty good too. It's not my favorite track in the game, but it's pretty good. And I think if you're just following the like main progression path, I think Godric's probably the most like crazy fantastical thing that you encounter up until that point in the game. Well, I'm not done talking about it, but where would you put Godric? Aesthetic, the music, his reward, his C tier. You think he's C tier?
I genuinely think.
I think you're insane.
No. You're a remembrance boss?
Yeah.
Never mind, he's C tier. Put him back in C.
There's but yeah, I'm not gonna put Godric in C tier because that's for bosses that I don't particularly care for. I think I'm deciding whether I want to put him in A or B. Because B is like, I think overall, like mechanically, he's like a fun boss to fight, which is important. I feel like the only thing holding him back from being A would probably be his rewards aren't very good. Although his Great Rune is pretty good too, especially for the early game. I forget some of these bosses drop Great Runes is also the thing. I'm gonna put him in A right in the middle as a baseline. I think everything about the boss, you know, his visual appearance, the actual gameplay, his music is pretty good. He has like one of the most memorable cutscenes in the whole game. His boss weapons kind of suck, but his Great Rune is pretty good for the early game. So I think for now, unless I change my mind, I'm gonna put him there. All right, moving on to Rolana, probably the second Great Rune Remembrance boss that most people run into. And I think I know where I want to put Rolana. I think I'm gonna put her in B. Like, I think she's fine. She's not my favorite. I think, you know, the first half of her boss fight is like a gimmick fight, basically. I mean, and it's fine. It's not particularly engaging or anything, nor is it difficult. I think this is more so of like a story, quote unquote, or like a lore significant boss instead of something that's obviously like mechanically in depth. But I will say, I do like how the first phase is basically like her present day self, where she's like basically, what's the word, she's like so far gone to the point where she's, you know, indulging in the art of reincarnation or whatever it is that Muriel says with the amber egg. And then after you beat on this deranged defenseless woman, Ronnie has like a trap set, I guess, where it triggers a spectral form of like Renala in her prime, you know, as queen of the full moon and whatever, and she does a bunch of sorcery attacks, and it's pretty cool. And her second phase isn't like super crazy or engaging or anything. You know, she has a bunch of different projectile spells that the player can use. I will say though, opening the fight with Comet Azure is pretty cool, although I'm surprised she doesn't use what is it called? The other legendary spell, the one that rains on people. I forget what it's called, but it's Lusat's spell. But yeah, the fight is also, the second phase is cool because the arena is awesome and the cutscene is really cool, but she summons ads, so that kind of like detracts from the boss fight to me. So yeah, like I think overall I'm comfortable putting this here. I don't strongly like or dislike this boss fight. All right, and I believe this is the Regal Ancestor Spirit. There's two versions of this boss fight, but only one is the Remembrance, but they're both basically the same thing, except I think there's one new mechanic in the Remembrance version. So where do I want to put the Regal Ancestor Spirit? This boss is pretty much like a joke in terms of difficulty. Yeah, I mean, you could, unless you're being really stupid and you get caught, you know, this boss is mostly a non-issue in terms of like actual gameplay. But I mean, the boss is fun to fight to me. You know, there's nothing particularly annoying about it. Nothing about the gameplay detracts from the boss fight in any way. But I think more so than anything, this is like a spectacle boss fight, like visually, and in terms of the music. This music for this boss is so good. It's one of my favorite tracks in the whole game. See, like you're fighting this like primordial aspect of nature. I remember seeing this boss fight. There's like a small clip of the boss fight in I think it's the gameplay trailer or the launch trailer for the original game all those years ago. And I was like, I want to find whatever that is, and I want to just experience whatever that is. And yeah, you can find this very early, or the other version of it very early, when it's like galloping through the air and spitting the, I don't know what it is, the magic barf everywhere. It sounded super uneloquent and not appealing, but I swear this boss is like actually really cool, like atmospherically and aesthetically. So I think, you know, again, this boss is not very difficult, but I think for what the boss is supposed to be, which is I feel like is more like a visual spectacle type thing, I'm going to actually put it here. This is personally one of my favorite things in the game, and one of the original things that I saw that I was really looking forward to in the game. Now we have Vanilla Starscourge Radahn, where he's riding around on his comically small horse, Leonard. Now I want to think about this for a second, because usually when I fight this boss, you know, talking about the gameplay for a second, usually when I fight this boss, I always summon all the dudes, because I feel like that's the canon, that might not be the right word, like the intended way to fight this boss. So I forget what actually triggers the Radahn Festival to activate, because depending on when you go there, Radahn might not be available to fight right away. I'm pretty sure getting to the Altus Plateau triggers the Radahn Festival, and there might be something else. I'm not sure what it is, but yeah, you could get to the Altus Plateau without fighting most of the bosses, especially if you get the Dectus medallions. You might be able to get there without fighting any bosses, actually. I don't remember, but yeah, depending on when you get there, Radahn might be significantly harder or easier, but regardless of that, yeah, I usually always summon all the dudes, the squad, to fight Radahn, because, you know, it fits with the whole Festival of War and everybody, you know, charging up the beach and trying to kill the strongest demigod in the Shattering. The whole setup, by the way, in terms of the lore, it's super cool, especially with the cutscene with Jaren, where he's talking about Radahn succumbing to the Scarlet Rot and how his wits are all gone and everything. And the line, I'm pretty sure there was a video I made a while ago where I fought Radahn, and the line at the end of that cutscene where he says howling at the sky, Oh, that's such a good line read from Jaren. It's so cool. That's one of my favorite cutscenes in the whole game. And the music is awesome. And, Radahn's lore with the, he learned gravity magic so that even though he's like gigantic, he can still ride his tiny horse because he's using his gravity magic to make sure he doesn't crush his horse, which is super wholesome. I guess Radahn likes animals or something. It's very cute and endearing. Also, apparently I forget what it's called, the silver cat talisman, the one that reduces fall damage. Apparently there's, I think it was cut from the item description, but it was also mentioned that Radahn also had a thing for cats. I guess Radahn is like the Disney princess of the Elden Ring universe. But yeah, overall his boss fight and his lore are all really cool. When you do have all the summons and you're all just wailing on Radahn, and he's like riding around and like swinging his swords in all these weird erratic ways, it's kind of a shit show, but it's like a cool shit show because again, it fits with the whole festival of war and everything like that. I'm trying to remember what his rewards are from his boss fight. You get his Great Rune, which is like a Erdtree's favor talisman. It increases your HP. Is it FP and stamina as well? I think it is. Like the Fat Bream from Dark Souls. I don't particularly use it all that much. And then his weapons, you get his dual curved greatswords, and you get, what is his other one? I don't actually remember. But no shit, I didn't remember what you get from it. So you get his greatswords, which are pretty cool. Ash of War does like a ton of damage in like PvP and stuff like that. And his other boss weapon is his great bow, which is like, I know it's pretty decent apparently if you're using the weapon art to hit like really big enemies and you're using the right arrows. But besides that, it kind of sucks like all great bows do. So yeah, he has, 1 out of 2 of his boss weapons are pretty good. So I think I'm gonna put Starscourge Radahn in S. And the next one is Morgott. I guess I didn't talk about the rewards from Rolana and the moose. For Rolana, you get her staff, which I think, depending on what it is that you're doing, might be is one of the better staffs in the game with the intelligence scaling. And then she also has Renala's full moon. It has a really high int requirement, but I'm pretty sure it when you hit something with it, it also decreases the enemy's resistance to magic, which is pretty good. And then the moose, I think you get, what do you get from it? You get the weird axe thing that the only thing people use it for is to buff yourself. And then the other item, it's not the head that spreads the blue juice everywhere. I forget what it is, but it's probably not that important. But yeah, those are the rewards for those 2 bosses. Overall, Lana's are pretty good actually, but the mooses are just whatever. But yeah, the next one is Morgott, not Margit. Margit is the tutorial boss. And yeah, this fight is pretty much like the tutorial fight, except obviously he has a bunch more moves. And in the second phase, he has, even more moves on top of that. Yeah, I think Margit, in terms of like his voice performance, is one of the best in the entire game. And I like walk around and I'll just randomly say foul tarnish to myself in Margit's voice just because it's like so iconic. And the cutscene for his boss fight intro is also really good. I remember losing my mind when I fought him for the first time and it was revealed that his cane is actually like a sword after he breaks all the stone off, and it has this like really crazy like rainbow Damascus pattern on it. It's really cool. But yeah, in terms of the gameplay, his boss fight, it's pretty challenging, especially with everything else until that point. Yeah, it's a evolution of the Margit fight essentially. Also, it's so weird that you can fight him 3 times in this game. There's a random like enemy mimic in the Altus Plateau just standing in a ditch, and if you kill it, it spawns a Morgott. So odd. But yeah, one really cool thing about this boss fight is that you could actually summon Melina. I'm sure everybody knows this already, but you can summon her for this boss fight, and she actually fights like a Black Knife assassin, except instead of having a black destined death dagger, she has like what I think it's called the Blade of Calling, which it's essentially the same weapon. It even has the same weapon art, but instead of Destined Death Flame, it's a golden projectile. It's really cool. Now, what does it say about Melina and Marka and the Black Knife Assassins? I have no idea. But in his second phase, when he starts using the Blood Flame attacks, it's also really cool. And the lore for Morgott and yeah, also Moog, but I'll talk about that later. It's obviously, he's very tragic as a character, being born as an omen and being basically like disowned by his own family and everything, and having to rule Leyndell in secret because people would not stand for their lord being an omen, and one of the only people still loyal to the Golden Order and the Erdtree, even when the Erdtree didn't love him back. There's an item description somewhere, I think it might be his Remembrance that mentions that, but yeah, dude is loyal to the end, to a fault even. But yeah, he's a really cool character, and one of the rare instances where you can actually speak briefly to the boss after you defeat them. His shriveled up old man corpse is on the floor after the boss fight, and weirdly enough, he has all of his omen horns are just gone, and his tail is gone too, I think. But yeah, I do really like this fight. I don't think I like it nearly as much as Radahn's, and I don't think the spectacle is nearly as... I think just overall it's a good fight. It doesn't like... It's not elevated to the point where I would put it in S or anything above A. So I'm thinking I'm gonna put it at the top of A. I think it's better than Godric's, but it's not one of my like personal super favorites. And his rewards are pretty good. You get his cursed greatsword, which looks really cool, and it has the blood flame attack on it. And I think the other reward you get is is it the Regal Omen Baron? So yeah, one of his things is pretty cool. One of them is, I mean, I think it's like useful in PvP, maybe. I might be wrong. I don't know what I'm talking about, but it does kind of suck that his like light magic and weapons, you know, the giant hammer and his like sword and spear that he has, which I think are all like existing models of weapons that are already in the game, like the giant crusher, the carrion greatsword, and a few other things. But yeah, his cool light magic stuff is not accessible in the game, which kind of sucks because it's really cool looking. But I think I'm gonna put him at the top of A. Right now we have a random one here with Estelle. I'm not gonna lie to you, finding Estelle the first time was really cool. I think up until this point, this is like the most alien, you know, outer god type thing that you find in the game. I think you could find a few falling star beasts before this point, but like obviously this is like the fully grown up evolved version of what they become. And I think his design is really cool. You know, he's this weird like bug skeleton thing, and the whole lore about what stars are and what Estelle is, a malformed star, is really, really interesting. Now, do I particularly like fighting this boss, especially after multiple times? That's the first time. He's fine. I won't lie, he's not my favorite, and his music isn't particularly, you know, it doesn't get me raring to go fight this space bug. But I think I'm gonna put Estelle at what is currently the bottom of B. I was gonna put him in C, but I don't think anything about the boss is actually like it is kind of silly that there are two of them. There's one all the way in the what is it, the consecrated snowfields or the forbidden lands? I don't remember. Yeah, I believe his two remembrance weapons are is it the Wing of Estelle and the baby rattle? That's what it is, right? Oh yeah, that's what it is. It's the baby rattle and the Ash of War, Waves of Darkness. The baby rattle, I've seen people use it. It's fine from what I remember saying. And the Ash of War, I don't remember how good the Ash of War actually is. But a lot of the times, Ashes of War from bosses are not particularly great. I feel like whether or not an Ash of War is good, it just seemingly depends on which one it is that you're talking about in particular. But a lot of the remembrance ones I don't remember being particularly good. I think for now, unless I change my mind, I'm gonna put him at the bottom of B. Oh boy. All right, the fire giant. All right, I'm gonna put him at C. Just, I thought about it for like 0.3 seconds and I was like, I don't enjoy fighting the fire giant, which is like, you know, in terms of the lore and everything and aesthetics and barring all that, like the most important thing is the gameplay and how fun a boss is to fight. And I don't particularly have that much fun fighting the fire giant. I don't think he's particularly hard, although the fact that he rolls around and he can like clip you seemingly at random, and sometimes he'll just constantly roll and run away from you, is very annoying. I do appreciate the scale and especially the music. I feel like gets us across where you're literally fighting this like giant, and I feel like with the fire giant and Horaloo and a few other songs, there's this like feeling of, how do I describe this? Horaloo and the fire giant remind me of like 80s fantasy soundtracks, like Conan and other stuff like that. I'm not sure if what I'm saying is making any sense to anybody, but that's just like, whenever I hear those two tracks in particular, that's what it reminds me of. So yeah, I think aesthetically the boss is cool, and the lore is also pretty interesting, especially with how the fire giants relate to Radagon and the fell god and all that. Also, can we talk about how fucked up it is that they kept this one fire giant alive at the end of this war, you know, Marika and Godfrey and all that, and they were like, yeah, we killed literally every other member of your race, but we're gonna keep you alive so you can watch over this thing, this giant metal pot. And he just kind of sits there at the top of the mountain waiting for nothing, I guess. Yeah, I believe his rewards are the fire giant, the red haired whip, which I don't remember if that's good or not. And then what is the other one? I don't remember. I'm gonna have to like look up every single one of these. Oh yeah, that's what it is. It's the fire giant whip, and it's the flame pillars, burn flame, I think it's called, incantation. And none of those are particularly great. I don't think they're awful. I think burn flame might actually be awful, but they're usable more or less. But yeah, I think for now, I think I'm comfortable putting the fire giant at C. Again, you know, everything that is not fighting the fire giant I think is cool, but actually fighting the fire giant, again, it's not even hard. It's just I don't particularly find it very engaging or fun. All right, Rykard. the first triple S of the video of the tier list. All right, so Rykard, if you're unaware, is a gimmick fight, and it is the latest iteration of the Storm Ruler gimmick fights that have been a thing since Demon Souls, I believe. I can now actually say that I have done every single Storm Ruler fight that they've ever put in a, Soulsborne game. I've done the Storm Beast Lord, the giant manta ray in Demon Souls. That one's really cool. I've done the Yorm the Giant fight in DS3. That was the first one that I ever did. I don't particularly like that fight. It's probably my least favorite out of the three of them. And then we have Rykard in Elden Ring with the Serpent Hunter. And I think Rykard's is probably my favorite. So the way it worked in the other two games is basically you get the Storm Ruler, and in the boss fight, you use the strong attack or the weapon art equivalent, and you do a single big slam on the ground, and it sends like a giant shockwave. And it's only that one move that you can actually do that with and hurt each respective boss with. Because just swinging the weapon around normally, it just swings like a regular greatsword and it doesn't do anything. And I think it's slightly better in Demon Souls because, one, I think the boss for that is way cooler, and also because it's flying around in the air, you're like swinging around and like swatting things out of the sky. It's really cool. But in Elden Ring with Rykard, they actually do this really cool thing where instead of it just being the one attack, they augment the entire moveset of the weapon. You basically have these like giant wind piercing attacks when used in the boss fight. So the entire moveset of the weapon is usable in the boss fight. So you can spam the weapon art, and that, works out for the most part if you're, not being stupid. But the fact that you can actually just run around and swing the weapon and fight the boss like an actual boss is, I feel like, really cool. Also, the funny thing about it is that I'm pretty sure the boss fight is doable with the weapon at +0, but you can actually go upgrade the weapon, and I think it does more damage in the Rykard boss fight, which is interesting. But yeah, Rykard's whole lore with the Volcano Manor, and how he was once revered by his followers for rising up against the Erd Tree and, even committing blasphemy, and, all that is really cool. And then how he like succumbs to gluttonous depravity and feeding himself to the serpent, and that being like the turning point between people following him and people, sort of breaking away. And, he still has this hardcore band of followers with like Tanith and Bernal and everything. It's really cool. Also, it's interesting because you can get to this boss fight in two different ways. One, you can do enough of the assassination contracts with Volcano Manor, and if you do enough of them, you can just talk to Tanith and she'll teleport you to the boss fight. Or you can go through the prison town in Volcano Manor, and at the end of that, you find a teleporter that leads you to the boss fight. But yeah, his rewards, I feel like this is probably at this point the best boss reward that you can get. You get his Great Rune, which I don't remember what it does. I'll be perfectly honest. I don't ever use it. But you get the Rancor spell that he uses in the boss fight with like the bad to the bone fire skull that explodes multiple times. But the unequivocal best weapon, I think they might have nerfed it at some point, but so I don't know how good it is now. But I remember back when the game came out, it was probably the best weapon in the entire game, which was the Blasphemous Blade, and more specifically its weapon art, which was a slam down that basically sent a wave of magma shooting forward. And not only did it just do a shit ton of damage, but it also healed you when you hit things with it. And I think depending on how many things it hit, it would heal you more. I might be wrong about that, but yeah, that weapon, it was just super good and some would argue broken. But yeah, I think the spectacle and the actual like functional gameplay being intertwined with the spectacle of the boss fight is really cool. It's not a 100% gimmick fight if you don't want it to be. His lore is really neat, and having so far the best weapon from a Remembrance boss, I think he's one of my favorite bosses in the whole game. All right, next we have Lich Dragon Fortisax, or as I and my friends like to call him, Rich Dragon 40 Stacks. I'll see if I can find that image. But yeah, this is the unique boss that you can fight at the end of Fia's questline. And I won't lie, it's been a while since I fought this boss, so I might not remember everything about him. But one, his lore is really cool. He's basically in a vain attempt to help save his friend Godwyn, is inside of his mind, soul, body, palace thing, and fighting off the death blight that is ravaging his body. And that's apparent in his visual appearance because he's, black and covered in death blight thorns and everything. Speaking of which, his visual appearance, the black and the red lightning attacks that he has looks really, it's very visually striking. And his music is his one of the best tracks in the whole vanilla game. It's really, really cool. Now, in terms of fighting him, I don't think, again, it's been a while. I don't remember disliking his boss fight, although I don't remember anything specific about it that is different from like the regular Ancient Dragon boss fights. I mean, he has the unique aspect to his lightning strikes where it'll also summon clouds of Deathblight, which depending on who you ask, that might be a negative or positive thing. Regardless of that, it makes sense because again, he's literally covered in Deathblight. I'm vaguely remembering a video that I made where I fought Fortisax and him doing this really cool attack where he flies really high into the air. I'm gonna see if I can find a clip of that and put it in here. Super lore related? It's a really cool boss fight that not a lot of people do. Holy shit, that's so cool looking. Ow. On all the various fail states that exist because of how like intersecting they are. Holy shit, that's so cool looking. Yeah, also the interesting in terms of the visuals of the boss fight, the skybox in his boss arena is really trippy and kind of freaky looking. Yeah, I guess it makes sense. You're in this sort of like nightmare hellscape that is in Godwin's mind, I think. I think I'll put Fortisax at in between. I want to put him at the top of A or at the bottom of S. Because again, apart from a few attacks, I don't remember anything specific that is like really cool in terms of his attacks, except for that one that I'm thinking of. I'll put him at the top of A, and his rewards are the Death Lightning incantation, which is useless outside of PvP. And then I believe his other one is also another incantation, and it's the double lightning stake that he's doing in the picture. I think I feel comfortable putting him at the top of A. All right, next up we have the only mandatory boss in Farum Azula, that being Malekith / Gurranq. I feel like a lot of people are kind of split on this boss and the way they feel about him, especially in the second phase, because some people really don't like how crazy and bombastic and like fast he is in a second phase. I really like this boss fight, and I think my only issue with this boss is that in terms of the gameplay is that he does not have a lot of health. Now, his Gurranq and Malekith forms are shared with 1 health bar, and I feel like I would personally like it if he had 2 health bars, but at the same time maybe he has 1, because especially in the second phase, if he had a whole other health bar, that might be a bit much and over the top, especially with how like aggressive and fast he is. I do really like this boss. I think I want to put him in S, but I think I like him more than the Moose and the Radahn. Again, I know a lot of people don't like how fast he is in the second phase, but I never personally had an issue with it. His lore with being Marika's shadow and then being betrayed by Marika is also really sad and interesting. I kind of wish we had gotten more lore about shadows in the, well, Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, but we didn't, so it's kind of disappointing. But yeah, his phase 2 cutscene transition is also one of the coolest in the whole game, where he pulls the black blade out of his hand and then his cloak burns away and reveals his super ornate armor and everything. It's so cool. And his rewards from his remembrance, the incantation where you summon a spectral version of the black blade and swing it around, is really cool. And then also the actual black blade that you get is also pretty cool. I remember that being a weapon that I used a decent bit when I got it the first time I played the game. And also, he probably has one of my favorite armor sets in the whole game. I think I'm currently using it on my character right now, playing through the DLC. And yeah, although his helmet looks really stupid on people, but obviously on him it looks cool because he's, you know, a dog man. But his music is also really good. I can't remember much of the first phase, but the second phase is obviously where it like picks up a lot and becomes a lot more epic sounding. But yeah, I really like Malekith and his boss fight. Also, there's this really weird mechanic where, I don't know how many people know about this, but there's a special item that you can get in Farum Azula that kind of functions like the pendant from the Dark Souls 1 DLC that you use against Manus to like deflect his magic attacks. And it's in a similar way. I think it's called the Blasphemous Claw. You can use it to parry specific attacks that Malekith does as he's like flipping around and sliding across the floor. It's really cool, although it's kind of weird that they included that in the boss fight, especially when he has so little health. Maybe it's there for people who are struggling to deal with his really over-the-top attacks. Although I feel like somebody who's having trouble with that would also have a really hard time trying to parry with the claw, but I don't know. I think the concept of the idea is really cool, but I often find myself just opting to swing at him and dodge his attacks. But when people do use it, it does look really cool. All right, Placiduous X. I don't think I like him as much as Rykard. I think Elden Ring probably has the best dragon boss fights in the entire Soulsborne series. Yeah, I'm not counting like the drakes or the ancient dragons, the generic ancient dragons. in Elden Ring. I'm talking about like actual named dragon unique boss fights. I remember losing my mind when I found out there was another boss fight in Farum Azula, and the way that you do it is you find this specific spot in the floor to lay down in, and you sit there for like 30 seconds. It's so weird, stupid, but I also love it. Yeah, the reveal or like the cutscene when you teleport in there and he's just like sitting there in the sky as the camera pulls back. It's really, really cool looking. Also, the lore drop that Placiduous Sax is the first Elden Lord, like for real. It's such an interesting lore drop. And also, it kind of sucks that we never get to find out who his consort slash god was. And people speculate about that all the fucking time, but it's never explicitly elaborated on. But in terms of the actual gameplay, you know, he's a really good dragon boss fight. He has a ton of the standard dragon stuff, like being able to summon lightning and stuff like that, and breathe fire. Obviously, the Ghidorah similarities like elevate the boss, like visually speaking, just because it looks really cool with the multiple heads and everything. And in the second phase, when he disappears and he starts flying around the perimeter of the arena in like red lightning clouds, it's really cool looking. Obviously, how can I talk about Placiduous Sax without talking about his nuke attack? It's one of the coolest looking attacks in the entire game, and especially like when he does it and like all the sound goes away and there's this like light ringing sound or like tinnitus type sound that's there afterwards after he pushes the lightning bolt into the ground. It's so cool looking, and obviously has become standard with unique dragon bosses in FromSoft games since DS3, having the flame breath transition into a Gojira style laser beam is it's always so cool. They've done it multiple times already at this point, but it's always so cool when they do it. And especially with them having multiple heads as they like wave around and they're all shooting lasers in different directions. It's really cool looking. And his rewards are, I believe, I don't remember what the weapon is called, but it's I believe it's a thrusting sword or a great thrusting sword or something like that. And it has the weapon art where you turn into a cloud and you fly down and strike the ground. And the other one, I believe it's Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike, one of the best spells in the entire game. It does so much damage. It's kind of stupid, but I love it. So yeah, he has pretty good rewards. So yeah, I think I feel pretty comfortable putting him at the top there. All right, next we have this poor misunderstood lad. Allegations Beaten. I remember the first couple times I fought this boss, I wanted to rip my hair out. I was still getting used to like the attack timings in Elden Ring. You know how a lot of enemies have like staggered and delayed attacks and everything like that. It was annoyed the shit out of me, and it still does occasionally. But I really do like this boss. I think I'm gonna put Moog. Where do I want to put Moog? I think overall his boss fight is pretty fair. I think the one thing that I still think is kind of lame is that obviously between phase 1 and phase 2, he does the knee heal where he stabs the air, and every time he does it, he causes blood loss and he also heals himself, unless you drink the specific tier in your physic. Although the thing that sucks is that you don't suffer blood loss anymore, so you don't take damage. However, he does still heal from it, which I think is super lame. So essentially, even if you take every precaution and you use the physic that protects you from knee heal, you still have to basically fight 1.5 bosses, where originally if his knee heal didn't heal him, if you use the tier, it would be 1 health bar, but you basically have to fight 1.5 health bars, which isn't really a knock on the boss. It's just kind of lame and annoying to me. But yeah, his lore is super cool, being abandoned by the Golden Order like Morgott, but then going on a different path instead of yearning for the Erdtree's love and favor, resenting it and starting to form his new order and dynasty and wanting to usher in the Age of Blood with the Formless Mother and everything is really cool. Also, his music is super sick. And the original base game lore, where everybody thought he was, being a huge jackass and a creep, kidnapping Mikola, and not only being a huge creep, but also ruining the potential chances of the only good person in Elden Ring being able to accomplish anything with, Mikola and his Halig tree. And then fast forward 2 years later, and we find out that Mikola was the one that charmed Moog into having himself kidnapped so that he could enter the Shadowlands and do everything with that. So if you are a Moog enjoyer, you are now allowed to publicly come out and say that without looking like a total fucking weirdo. But yeah, I do really like Moog's boss fight, apart from the whole knee healing, even if you use the tier, whatever. That's not actually important. But yeah, his 2 rewards, I believe, there's his Great Rune, which I think is only useful in PvP because he leads all the bloody fingers and everything like that, which I don't even know what it actually does. I don't invade or do PvP because I'm not a sociopath. But his 2 rewards are obviously his 3-pronged spear. Is it a trident? I guess it's a trident technically, which I remember lots of people using when the game first came out, which I'm pretty sure they had to nerf it at least once. Maybe they did it multiple times. I don't remember. But yeah, having giant AoE blood loss in PvP was that was definitely a decision from Selfmade. And then I believe the other weapon or the other reward from his remembrance is the Blood Flame Talons, which I don't think are particularly good, but I mean, it looks cool. So I will say though, this is kind of like a non-complaint. Just something that I think is kind of weird is that I feel like his voice doesn't match his like character. I think it's fine for the most part, but especially in his introductory cutscene at the end where he says the birthplace of our dynasty. For some reason, when he says that, it sounds like a normal person trying to do a monster voice, where I feel like if his voice was just like naturally bassier and deeper, that would have landed a lot more. Maybe that's just a me thing. I feel like the rest of his dialogue is pretty good though. But yeah, where do I want to put Moog? I think I'll put him at the top of A. I think I like fighting him more than 40 stacks here, but I don't know if I like it enough to put it in S. Yeah, I think I'll leave him at the top of A. Also, watching people one-shot Moog with Comet Azure because he has to walk 60 miles down his flight of stairs is very funny. Oh boy, here we are. Oh, Millennia. I have very complicated feelings about Millennia. So it's very obvious that Millennia, on top of being super difficult because she's like optional and really late into the game, she's also supposed to be like the dance style, like person with a sword boss fight. You know, in DS1 that's like Artorias. In DS2 there's a few of them, actually there's a lot of them, you know, like Surlon, Velstadt, the Fume Knight, and a few others that I'm probably forgetting. And in DS3, there's also a few of them. The Abyss Watchers is my favorite in DS3. That's that style of boss fight. The Soul Cinder as well in Gale. It's one of the more iconic styles of boss fights in From Software games, and in Bloodborne, like Gurman, and then, you know, Genichiro and stuff like that. And Ishin, where it's literally, it's you and a person with a vaguely player-esque moveset, or it's you and then your opponent has a unique but, you know, a moveset that makes sense for a one-on-one fight. And the way that you two interact and, you know, dodging attacks and exchanging blows is like, it becomes almost a rhythmic in a sense, especially after you fight these bosses for long enough. You know, the things you're supposed to be dodging make sense. They're very clear visually speaking. And for the most part, the boss fights feel really fair. You know, maybe they'll have like one or two kind of bullshit things, but nothing particularly egregious. Yeah, there's a reason why these style of boss fights are really popular. It's because they're really fun, and especially if like the boss is really cool looking, then, you know, that's even better. I still think Surlon is like the best boss in the entirety of Dark Souls 2. Oh yeah, I almost forgot about the Ivory King too. God, these bosses are so good. Anyways, so it's very clear that Millennia is supposed to be that style of boss fight for Elden Ring. However, I think overall, without getting into like the nitty gritty of every single one of her moves, I think overall she is a really well designed boss fight mechanically and fair for the most part. There's like one or two things that I feel like are a bit overtuned, even if the boss is supposed to be hard and is optional. One, obviously Waterfowl, the fact that she can just do it seemingly at random. Sometimes she'll do it multiple times in a boss fight. Sometimes she'll do it once. Like, people have tried to like figure out when specifically, estimations as to when or why she would do it, but it's seemingly just random. But yeah, going back to Waterfowl really quick, obviously there's I don't think you can parry your Waterfowl. If you could, that would be really funny, but I don't think you can. So there's basically two ways to dodge Waterfowl, or I guess three if you want to get technical, but one is just to be really far away, and if she gets close to you, if you're still far enough, you can just roll away and it'll miss you more than likely for the most part. One, which is a strategy that I often use, is to grab a shield and put barricade on it, and whenever she does it, I just pull it out and use barricade, so that way it takes no stamina, because if you try to block it normally, it'll probably eat through your stamina and open you up after she breaks your guard, and you'll still probably die. Although the thing that sucks, which my brother just mentioned, I don't know if that came through, but yeah, she heals upon dealing damage to you. So I'm not sure what part of like Scarlet Rot or anything is allowing her to heal via doing damage, and it's so much healing to the point that like it could negate like minutes of boss fight and damage that you do in a few swings, depending on how slow you are and how many openings you take or don't take. So if you like take the boss fight really slowly, but you still get hit, it could be really frustrating that she can heal. Also, blocking, even if you have 100% physical block, she will still heal as if she's hitting you, but obviously you take no damage, so it's kind of stupid. It makes no sense. Yeah, Waterfowl and the healing, to me, are the two biggest issues. And the third way to dodge a Waterfowl, going back to that, is I used to be able to do this. Again, I haven't done it in a really long time. But if she starts the waterfowl and you're right next to her, you can stand under her and, she'll, be above you, tracking you as she's about to do it. And you can dodge away from it. There's a very specific way. I think you dodge into it twice and then away from it, or you stand still and she'll fly over you and you can just back away from the third attack. But it's very specific the way that you have to dodge it. But if your balls are huge, you can do that, is my point. And I often use the shield or just dodging it straight out whenever I fight her. Again, it's been a while, so the specifics of that are not the freshest in my mind. But yeah, beyond those two things, a waterfowl, which it has counters, some of which are much harder to pull off than others, but the healing, I feel like, is the biggest. Because she has a lot of health too, is the thing. So her healing, even if it's just like a couple hits, can feel like negative progress sometimes. And in fact, this is sometimes negative progress depending on how much she heals and how much damage you do. But yeah, everything else about the boss in terms of the gameplay, I feel like is mostly fair. She has a few attacks in the second phase, and she's a lot more aggressive in the second phase, so your openings are a lot less frequent, but they are there. And I believe for a lot of her moves, disregarding waterfowl, you can actually parry her, although she is one of the bosses that you have to parry multiple times before she gets stance broken, which I think is fair. I think that's a decent solution that they implemented in Elden Ring to allow like bosses and things to be parried without it just being like brain dead broken like in Dark Souls 1. But yeah, her lore with being an Empyrean and Miquella's sister and being the envoy of the outer god of rot, and her relationship with Miquella and golden needles and everything to do with Millicent's questline is really cool. Also, her music is fucking awesome in the second phase. The first phase is it's fine, although it gets really annoying to listen to, especially after she says Blade of Miquella 65 million times. But yeah, her second phase transition cutscene along with the music and everything is really, really cool. I really like it a lot. And the rewards you get from her boss fight, her Great Rune, which is just a really, really shitty version of a rally from Bloodborne. It's almost not worth using. I think the whole Great Rune system is just really bad in general. It would be really nice if they augmented the way you played the game in a more significant way, but because they're tied to a perishable consumable that, goes away on death, it kind of makes using things like Melania's Great Rune and other things like that not really worth it, when you could just straight up have a giant health bar or more stats or whatever. Her remembrance rewards are her sword, which lets you do waterfowl, and it's not nearly as good as when she does it, but you know what, that's fine. It's a cool giant katana, which I kind of wish was the entire prosthetic with the katana attached to it instead of just you holding the blade like a sword, even though it doesn't have a handle on it, but whatever. Anyways, it's her sword and also the Scarlet Aeonia incantation, which Scarlet Rot, no matter where you use it, unless they're immune to it, is super, super good. However, I don't think Scarlet Aeonia is actually as good as like the Scarlet Rot breath, just because you have to launch yourself literally right next to an enemy, and 99% of the time that's super dangerous and not worth doing, but it looks really cool, so it gets style points for that, I guess. So where do I want to put Melania? I know this is like, regardless of waterfowl and the healing, I think she's a really good boss, and it's not even waterfowl that really annoys me. It's the healing that I feel like is just pushes the boss right over the edge of being too much. But I don't want to rank her really low because of that, even though I think that's a really big issue that I personally have with the boss. But again, because of the healing, it does detract from my enjoyment of the boss. When you're sitting there poking the boss for however long, and then she hits you 2 or 3 times and she heals all that damage back, it's very discouraging. And maybe if it was like specific attacks where she healed, that would be better, like her command grab, that would be a good I'm going to heal attack, and it makes sense. But or maybe if they just lessened it overall, I don't know. Again, she's optional and near the end of the game, so you could wave your hand and be like, oh, well, she's optional, so she can be bullshit, which I think is a stupid argument. But again, I do like this boss fight and everything about her. It's just the healing really. But again, I do think the most important thing is how fun the boss is to fight for me. Would it be toxic if I put Melania at the bottom of A behind Godric? That feels kind of like BM. But with how like not cool Godric is and everything like that, like I do enjoy fighting Godric is a thing. I don't think Melania deserves to go into B tier or below, because while I don't particularly enjoy fighting these bosses, it's so complicated. I'll put her above Godric because that seems it would seem toxic to not do that. But yeah, I am also coming at this from a relatively casual player. I'm not, let me solo her or any of these people doing like Rune level 1 +0 weapon, playing it with a pair of Donkey Kong bongos and a dance pad type person. Yeah, Melania is easily the hardest fight in the entire vanilla game. It's not even a question. But when you do have moments where, you know, she's not doing bullshit things, you know, there are still moments of like that sort of like dance that is present in, you know, a lot of 1v1 night style boss fights in FromSoft games. It's still there, but there's just a few things that take away from that, in my opinion. All right, and here we have Godfrey / Horaloo. So I don't think this is a hot take. I think I like fighting Horaloo more than I like fighting Godfrey. I'm pretty sure 99% of people watching this would agree, but I think fighting Godfrey is satisfying. Again, he's like a 1v1 style boss fight where a lot of his moves are like telegraphed. You know, he has a few sneaky things that he does that catch you off guard if you're not paying attention. But overall, I think in both phases, his boss fight is like really fair. But if you get caught slipping, you know, it's very easy to die in that boss fight. I will say though, I think phase 1 is a lot less interesting than phase 2. I wish phase 1 or even phase 2, whichever, I wish Siraj was part of the boss fight in some way instead of being murdered mid boss fight cutscene, which I mean is super metal when he does it, but it's kind of like, he has this cool ghost lion stand that is actually a real lion after he climbs off of his back and Godfrey just rips him apart. But yeah, Godfrey's lore is super cool, being connected to the Crucible and the Tarnished, and then, you know, being banished after fighting wars for Marika and all that, and also having Siraj being his limiter so that he could act as a lord, and then when Siraj isn't there, you know, he reverts back to being a scary warrior man and also WWE wrestler. Yeah, he's probably one of the best fights in the entire game, and the fact that, you know, it's at the end of the game is really cool because there's a lot of times in video games where the ends of the games are really bad because they often front load the shit out of their games. But I think Elden Ring is pretty good about not doing that, and Godfrey is one of the good examples of that. His rewards, I believe his rewards from his Remembrance are his axe and the Ash of War, which is the roar stomp thing, which is bad. I don't remember what the weapon art on the axe is. I don't remember seeing people using it a whole bunch, the axe, but so I mean his rewards aren't great, which is like a shame, but I mean he looks cool, so I feel like I would like Godfrey's OST more in the first phase if they didn't use his boss fight and his OST in the Golden Shade version in Lanedale way earlier in the game. But yeah, his first phase OST is very obviously like regal sounding because, you know, he's the first Elden Lord, the human Elden Lord, quote unquote. And, you know, it is fitting for that part. And obviously Horaloo's OST, again, it reminds me a lot of like 80s fantasy, like Conan style music. And yeah, Horaloo is one of the coolest things that they've ever done in a Souls game ever. All of his like grappling command grab moves are so cool. Watching Horaloo grab your mimic or your friend and just fly 30 feet into the air and slam them into the ground is it's so cool looking. Yeah, I think I'm gonna put Godfrey. I like him more than Malekith. It's interesting actually because they both have pretty like meh first phases, but their second phases are so over the top and cool. And I think Godfrey's fight lasts longer, or Horaloo's fight lasts longer, and I like Horaloo's fight, so I think I'm gonna put him at the top of S because, well, I think I like Malekith's fight more. It doesn't last nearly as long, and that's probably for a good reason. So I think I'll put Godfrey at the top of S. All right, and here we are at the end of the vanilla game. Finally, it's only been like however long this is after I edit it. All right, so I have these two separated. Even though they are parts of the same boss, they are different bosses because they are completely different, like, enemies that have unique movesets. So I think I am going to put them together wherever I do decide to put them because, again, you do have to fight one after the other no matter what. So they are parts of the same boss fight. And I think I'm going to just grab them and put them both up here at the top of S. And I think for Radagon, I don't think that takes any explaining. His lore, his actual boss fight mechanically and gameplay wise and visually, he looks really cool. And his OST is it's literally the main menu theme. It's so good. He has a bunch of really cool attacks, and he has this like Golden Order lightning bolt that you don't get in the game, which is kind of a shame because it's really cool looking. But he also has the command grab where he grabs you and smashes you with the hammer like he's forging the Elden Ring. That's what I think of whenever he does that. It's like he's holding you to an anvil and like smashing you like he's forging something. But yeah, his lore and you know, the whole dual marker Radagon thing and what that means now that the DLC is out, and you know, this is all the lore that we're getting. What the fuck is going on with any of this? I have no idea, but it's really cool. So I don't think Radagon takes any explaining. That shot where he's holding the hammer in the air and then the boss music starts playing, it's peak. Yeah, I don't think Radagon takes any explaining as to why he's up there. Now the Elden Beast, on the other hand, yeah, I put him there already, but I might be surprising to some people. A lot of people really don't like the Elden Beast fight. However, I feel like maybe it's changed a little bit now that you can summon Torrent in the boss fight. I've not actually fought the Elden Beast since they did that, but ever since my first playthrough and every other time that I fought him, I think it's been like 2 or 3 times at this point, I really like the Elden Beast boss fight. It's very, how do I say this? It's very reminiscent of fighting the Moon Presence in Bloodborne, where you fight the human person and then you fight the alien mastermind, to use that word, behind the whole thing. And I remember seeing the name of the boss the first time I played the game, but I didn't know what it looked like. I just remember seeing the name. I was like, what is that? What is the Elden Beast? And then getting all the way to the end of the game and seeing what it was. I won't lie, he does look kind of silly with his, funny little arms and legs. I think he has legs. Swinging around a sword, and he's supposed to be this like eldritch alien thing. But also on the flip side, he does look really cool, being this sort of like star clustered space dragon thing that is the embodiment of order and the Elden Ring, sent by the greater will. And the nerve endings that also look like tree roots is really cool. I think there's something in space that actually looks like this, like the Elden Beast, although I don't remember specifically what it is. But again, they pull from a ton of like real life inspiration for stuff like this. So but yeah, the OST and the boss arena is, it's one of the coolest boss arenas in the entire series. And the OST being the other parts of the main menu theme is really cool. And I think that some of the biggest like issues or complaints people have about the boss is one, that it runs away too much, and I could kind of agree with that, although it never really does it so much to the point that I think it hampers my enjoyment of the boss. It is annoying, but again, I don't think the Elden Beast is particularly hard that having to chase after it is like annoying. And Elden Stars is the other like big thing with the boss that people don't like, even though I'm pretty sure you can just bait it and then dodge the other way and it'll fly past you and it should be gone after a little bit. But yeah, I don't really have an issue with Elden Stars or anything else like that. Although one attack that I do have like trouble dodging sometimes is like the attack where he'll just like start smashing his sword into the ground. I'm not really sure how to dodge that. If I'm next to him, I kind of just like spam roll, and sometimes I don't die. So but yeah, a lot of his attacks that are really cool, the command grab where he strings you up on a rune arc like Marika and stabs you a shit zillion times is really cool. And a lot of the attacks where he flies into the air and he like spreads his wings, and it's like this very like almost like he's swimming through the air and stuff like that as the music is playing in the background, and with the arena it just all comes together. It's like, it was one of the most, this might be like a bit hyperbolic, it's like one of the most, like, I remember seeing the Elden Beast for the first time and seeing him do a bunch of these different things, and I was like, this is one of the most beautiful things in a video game that I've ever seen. And again, I feel like I sound like a crazy person to some people, especially people who don't like this boss fight, but like just the whole, how everything comes together with like the boss's moves and the music and the arena and the lore and everything, it's like it comes together in this like really cohesive way where yeah, you feel like you're fighting like this eldritch alien thing, but it's not like a creepy like Lovecraftian thing like in Bloodborne. It's this sort of thing that is like so beautiful that it's kind of scary because you don't understand it. Does that make sense? But yeah, I've been a ride or die for the Elden Beast boss fight ever since this game came out. I am really curious to see what how the boss fight plays with Torrent being able to, you know, be there. It's crazy how long it took them to add that into the game. I remember people modding Torrent into the Elden Beast boss fight and being like, wow, this boss fight is so much better. It's almost like he was meant to be there. So I don't know if that was a feature they wanted to add but just didn't for whatever reason up until recently, or whether they saw people, you know, request that and mod that and were like, oh, that's a good idea, and then they did it. But either way, it fits really well, you know, Torrent being your ride or die. But yeah, his rewards, the Sacred Relic sword, which is, it's a great sword, but being the #1 rune farming tool in Elden Ring. You know, those poor Albinaurics in Mogwin Palace. I think there's a stat that came out at some point where they literally tallied how many Albinaurics people have killed in that one spot, and it's very concerning, but also very funny. And then the other weapon you can get being a Marika's hammer, which is really cool. I kind of wish there was a, you know, besides looking really cool, it's Radagon's hammer or Marika's hammer. I kind of wish, in addition to the like slam attack that you get with the weapon art, you could also it had a command grab where you do the Radagon thing where you smash somebody with the hammer, like you're forging the Elden Ring. I think that would be really cool. But yeah, it also has a really cool description where it says something along the lines of the hammer that Marika used to shatter the Elden Ring and the one that Radagon attempted to repair it with. Yeah, that's a really, again, I ranked both of them in the same spot because, again, they are part of the same boss fight, but I feel like if these were separated, most people would move the Elden Beast probably down significantly. But yeah, I love both of these boss fights, and I think the Elden Beast, I'm gonna say it, the Elden Beast receives too much slander. If the Elden Beast has 100 fans, I am one of them. If the Elden Beast has 1 fan, it is me. If the Elden Beast has 0 fans, I am dead. But yeah, that has completed the vanilla Remembrance bosses. That's what, 15? If we count Radagon and Elden Beast as 1. And then 2 years later, we finally got the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC after being teased by Michael Zaki. That's that picture of Miyazaki grilling meat with that starving dog being the FromSoft community. And yeah, we let him cook, and he returned with The Last Supper. But yeah, I think the quality of the DLC bosses is, for the most part, is like a step above a majority of the vanilla Remembrance bosses. So without further ado, let's start with the Divine Lion. I'm gonna put this like right there. I really like the Divine Lion boss fight. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be the first Remembrance boss that you encounter in the DLC. You know, the scaling for the boss and its damage and everything isn't super high. I love the concept of fighting a Chinese lion dancer, but obviously it's been adapted to fit within the fiction of Elden Ring, and it's been inserted into the Hornsent culture and everything. It's really cool. Also, apparently some people didn't realize that the Divine Lion is literally 2 dudes in a lion costume, like a Chinese lion dancer. Some people are stupid, but yeah, I feel like for the most part, this boss is really fair, although sometimes it is hard to read what the boss is doing because there are times where it's like twirling around in the air and it's difficult to read what it's doing. But for the most part, I feel like the boss fight is really fair. And the OST, can we just talk about the OST for a second? It's like, I'm over here looking at the rest of the DLC bosses, and I think the Divine Lion might have my favorite OST in the entire DLC in terms of bosses. There's a few other things that I also really like. In terms of bosses, I think the Lion has my favorite song. And then the phase 2 transitions where it's switching between the different elements, it's so good. I remember the first time I played the DLC, you know, obviously when you get it down to 50% or whatever, it'll fly into the air and switch to lightning. And then it'll also switch to like a storm element where it can like throw tornadoes and things like that. But on my first try, I killed the boss without finding out that it can also switch to ice as well. For whatever reason, it didn't do that on my first run through of the DLC. So I remember finding that out afterwards and being like, what? How did I not see that? But yeah, as an intro to the DLC, I think this is one of my favorite bosses in the entire boss lineup for Elden Ring, and even in the DLC. All right. Rolana, the Twin Moon Knight. If you had asked me what I thought about this boss a week ago, I probably would have put it in front of or behind Melania. I really did not like this boss when I fought it the first time. You know, obviously your first run through of a DLC and, you know, fighting bosses for the first time is going to be way more difficult than when you do it again on subsequent playthroughs. But yeah, I remember getting really frustrated with how hyper aggressive Rolana is, you know, seemingly having like unending combo strings where when they do end, you have no stamina to attack, or you've gotten hit so much that you can't, you have to heal instead of attacking to get more damage. But I think I fought her again recently, and I used guard counters instead of, I think the first time I did it, I used the Star Fists and just did charge attacks because I'm a sociopath. But yeah, I used the deflecting tier that you get from the Furnace Golem in the first area, and I was just using a greatsword and guard countering, and it went so much better than the first time that I did this. It was like, I think I beat her in like 3 or 4 tries. And for context, my first attempt fighting Rolana took me like an hour and a half. But yeah, if we're basing my opinion off of the second run through, then I have a much more leveled opinion about Rolana than I did originally. She is still hyper aggressive, but I was, you know, negating most of that by, you know, guarding and then using the greatsword. If you hit her 3 times, I think it is, she'll get staggered and you can wail on her or crit her. But yeah, if you're not careful and you get clipped or you misjudge a thing or you run out of stamina guarding something, you will definitely eat tons of damage and probably die. It is still very hard. But yeah, visually she looks really cool. Her weapons are super cool in the boss fight and when you get them. Her lore is really interesting, being Renala's sister who decided to join Mesmer, and her seemingly consenting to that and allowing her to go. And her attack where she drops the 2 moons and then slams into the ground it's super cool. I remember seeing that for the first time and being caught off guard, and I subsequently died and was also amazed. So also her transition into her phase 2 where she swings the swords to the side and they ignite is also really, really cool. I will say though, this is the case for a few of the DLC bosses, but some of them don't have any form of cutscenes or dialogue at all whatsoever, and it's kind of disappointing because even if it's just a little bit, it would have given a lot more character and exposition to some of these bosses that I feel like needed it. It does kind of suck to see some of these really cool bosses and they have like nothing going on besides the fight, which I feel like, you know, that is one approach. You know, you just walk through a fog wall and there's just a fucking fight that you have to do, and that's that. And all the information you get is from like items and her soul and everything. But yeah, Rolana and another boss fight, Ramana, later on, I feel like would have benefited a lot from having cutscenes that would have helped with like exposition and things like that. But all right, so where am I gonna put? I should talk about her rewards as well. Obviously you get her twin swords, which are really, really cool. I don't think they're particularly great, especially her the weapon art where you swing the fire around is not very good, and I don't think the wave attacks are particularly good either. But as I said, they're nowhere near as good as when she uses them. But the weapons are still really cool, so who cares? But hey, you get her swords, and you also get the spell where you double slam moons to the ground and then do it yourself. See, they should do this more often with you know, remembrance bosses and things like that, where the stuff you get is what the boss does in the boss fight. I feel like the only way that it would be even better would be if like the boss weapons had the actual boss movesets and not just the weapon arts. But I don't think they've ever really done that in any of the Souls games or boss weapons. It's usually just like a unique attack or two that they have. But yeah, she has pretty good rewards. She looks really cool. Her boss fight, the second time through, was a lot less frustrating. So my opinion has changed a lot about this boss. Also, her music is really good. I don't know if I said that or not already, but yeah, my opinion on this boss has changed quite a bit. I don't know if I want to put her in S, and I don't know if I like her more than Moog. I think I like her more than Fortis X. I think I'll put her at right next to Moog. All right, Commander Gaius. I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna put him like right there. I think the fact that he rides around on a boar is really cool. And the fact that he does Psycho Crusher with the boar in his second phase is also really cool. But I mean, besides that, I mean, his lore is pretty cool, I guess, as well. Being Radahn's homeboy and them learning magic together along with the boar, which I think is who Gaia is in the boss soul description. But yeah, besides his lore and the fact that he rides around on a boar, I don't particularly care for this boss at all. I don't know if this is actually like an issue that needs fixing, or if they fixed it or changed anything, but his charge that he does towards the player has like a really weird extended hitbox. So I don't know if that's intentional and they fixed that, or what the deal with that is. But yeah, I remember this being the boss that people were talking about, like wonky hitboxes and things like that.
X.
Okay, what does he do that is not something that generic ancient dragons do?
I don't know, I didn't fight him.
He's stupid. I hate you. But yeah, nothing Gaius does besides that Psycho Crusher, which is super hilarious. Besides that, is particularly like memorable or flashy or anything. Also, I can't even remember what his OST sounds like. I'm gonna be perfectly honest. Yeah, I remember this was one of the bosses where they updated the game so that every time you enter the boss fight, he starts in the back instead of being like right in front of you. They had to change that because yeah, you would walk through the door on subsequent attempts and he would just charge you immediately and you would die. Yeah, I don't particularly find this boss fun to fight. Nothing about his moveset, at least so far, is particularly engaging. Maybe it'll change once I fight him again, but so far I've only found him once, but it was relatively recently. And yeah, if I wasn't like a completionist weirdo who had to do everything every single time I played a Souls game, I probably wouldn't fight him again, you know, if I could help it. But yeah, his rewards are actually pretty good, which is funny. The sword lance, which is very good. It's just a good like big ass poking weapon, and the weapon art kind of sucks, but it's funny looking. And I believe the spell that you can also get is where it summons rocks from beneath. I think it's like 3 times, and it does a lot of damage. So ironic that this boss that I don't like has pretty decent rewards for fighting him. And also afterwards you get, what is it, 5 Shadow Tree fragments in his pants. Yeah, I'm pretty confident putting him below the Fire Giant, because the Fire Giant can be kind of annoying to fight, but I mean, he's not hard. Like, guys can be hard and he's annoying to fight, so all right. And next we have the Putrescent Knight. I remember seeing this guy in the I think it was the gameplay trailer. There's like a brief clip of him throwing his boomerang axe thing, and I thought he was gonna be a generic enemy, I won't lie, but he's actually a remembrance boss. And I think I'm gonna put the Putrescent Knight at the bottom of S, at the bottom of triple S, and this might be weird, but hear me out for a second. So I think for the most part, in terms of gameplay, the boss is fine. I think the only wonky issue that I have with this boss is the attacks where he spreads Ghost Flame on the ground. Some of the patterns that it spreads out in is kind of weird to dodge because you're supposed to jump over it, but sometimes you jump over it and it still hits you, so I'm not really sure what you're supposed to do about that. But yeah, for the most part, I think the boss fight mechanically is fine. He has a really satisfying combo to dodge where the horse will charge you and then he'll spin at you, and the horse will come up again, charge you, and then he'll spin at you again. And dodging that is really satisfying. But the main reason why I put him up here, and again, this is purely like, this is not like objective or anything. This entire list is not objective or anything. This is literally just like my opinion, man. But the main reason why I put him up here is the OST, specifically the first phase of the OST. The second phase is also really good, but the first phase, I really like the first phase OST, and you know, the lore surrounding the boss being you know, guarding Saint Trina and being sort of this putrescent flesh sort of settling down in the deepest part of the Shadowlands, sort of being given this peaceful solitude with, you know, the whole sleep thing with Saint Trina, and it deciding to, you know, I guess protect Saint Trina, you know, having been giving this like peaceful recluse. I find that like really compelling. It kind of reminds me of in a really weird and roundabout way of Garl Vinland and Maiden Estrella from Demon Souls, where you have this knight protector entity and this maiden in this like really deep dank part of the world, and that maybe that's intentional, and maybe there are supposed to be parallels there, or maybe I'm just crazy. But yeah, I feel like the OST really ties all these things together, where it has this like really melancholic atmosphere in terms of the OST, where it almost, whenever I hear that part of the song, it kind of, I almost imagine it's like Saint Trina singing to the putrescent knight, or just in general, almost kind of like a lullaby, even though it's not really like lullaby sounding, but just supposed to be like really peaceful singing that is supposed to bring rest to this amalgam of flesh that is for some reason animated and sentient. But yeah, I think the OST and the lore about the boss, what little of it that there is really, really cool. And talking about the appearance really quick, I will say the boss is kind of silly looking. You know, that's part of the reason why when I first saw it, I thought it was going to be a generic enemy from the trailer. But yeah, it's almost like, you know, the horse is like half melting into the ground, and there's this like weird bulbous skeleton goo man with a slime head. It's kind of like the Orphan of Kos, the Dreg blue enemy, I forget what they're called, but those enemies from the Dark Souls 3 DLC, and a horse. You just like smash them all together and you got this guy, and he also happens to be melting, I guess. He does look kind of silly, but I feel like it would have been cool if it was more of like a standard like night enemy, but maybe he could be like melting. That maybe the parallel to Demon Souls in that way would have been more concrete, but I think it's still there. But it's just, he's a lot silly looking and less like stoic looking. But yeah, the rewards you get are the axe that he uses, which is apparently really, really good. Just like its regular attack, swinging it around. And the weapon art is, I'm pretty sure it's bad, but it looks funny, so. And then you get one of the putrescent sorceries from it. I don't remember which one it is. I don't remember if it's the giant lob one or the one that shoots a ton of them, but I think it's okay. From what I remember seeing people use it. But yeah, it's mostly the lore and the soundtrack and, you know, the whole association with Saint Trina that I really like about this boss. Again, this is 100% like subjective stuff. But moving on, next we have Mesmer the Impaler, the poster child Artorias Lady Maria of the Elden Ring DLC. And I feel like most people sort of clocked in on the whole you know, DLC poster child, not being the actual final boss of whatever the DLC is. But nonetheless, people were very excited to see what the deal with this dude was, considering I'm pretty sure when the trailer was shown, it was revealed that Mesmer was a child of Marika, so people were very curious to see how he fit into the whole, you know, the lore and timeline and everything. But yeah, his lore and his relationship to his mother, Marika, being very interesting. You know, becoming the face of Marika's atrocities committed against the Hornsent in the Shadowlands, and him fully taking that on, seemingly to, you know, at the bequest of Marika herself. It's very strange because it's implied that Mesmer takes the fall or whatever for the Hornsent genocide to like take the heat off of Marika, who obviously ordered it, because I guess committing genocide even as the god of your own age would look bad. But like, I don't really get how that makes sense, because she is the god of the age, so shouldn't she be able to technically do whatever she wants? And also doesn't the entirety of Erdtree society dislike anything that falls out of the Golden Order, you know, omens and those who live in death and all that? Like, aren't they already like super prejudiced in that way? It's really confusing the way that's explained, but regardless, the lore surrounding him and his relationship with Marika and the Crusade in the Shadowlands is very, very interesting. Also, the cute shipping art that people make of Mesmer and Alana is very, very, very cute, very wholesome. But yeah, his fight, getting into that, the actual gameplay. One, his introductory cutscene is very, very cool. There's so much character you can grasp immediately from his introductory cutscene. One, it's very obvious that Mesmer is actually blind and that he's using the snakes to see. Also, the jump cut to the snake staring at you immediately in your face is very funny. It's also interesting because the lines that he says in that cutscene are also lines that are in the initial reveal trailer for the DLC, but they sound different. And I'm not really sure why they changed it. I'm assuming it's the same voice actor, but they just used different takes of those lines with the whole "wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so devoid of light," or whatever he says. That line in the trailer is different in the final version of the game. And again, I'm assuming it's the same voice actor, but it sounds really different. And I won't lie, I like the trailer version better, but it's not really that big of a deal. It's just something that I noticed, which is interesting. But yeah, what can I say mechanically about the boss? He's really, really fun to fight. I feel like ever since DS3, you know, DS1 and DS2, I feel like caused this mostly. People getting really tired of the knight style boss fights, even though they're really good. There were so many in DS2 that people were getting kind of tired of them. And I feel like DS3 and Elden Ring now especially has sort of, there are still one-on-one, you know, fight dude with sword boss fights, but they're a lot more different. And I feel like Mesmer is really like exemplary of that, where he has a really like unique moveset with the spear, you know, so he's like flying around the screen. And my favorite attack that he does is I think it's part of the weapon art you get from his boss weapon, where he's like, he stabs like a bunch of times as he's like floating towards you. It's really, really cool. I like that attack a lot, very specifically. But yeah, also because people want all 18 inches of Mesmer, he has a command grab impale attack, because of course he does. Also, I love that his introductory attack where he dunks you with the giant fireball is, well, him dunking you with a giant fireball. And not only does he do it at the beginning of his first phase, he also does it at the beginning of his second phase, which the cutscene for that is also very, very cool. The OST throughout the whole boss fight is also amazing. You know, Mesmer's abyssal serpent seemingly being another curse slash repercussion of Marika and Radagon having children, which it's very interesting actually, because it's very explicitly stated multiple times that Marika is Mesmer's mother, but it's never stated that Radagon is Mesmer's father, even though he has the red hair and, you know, he's like really pale and everything. But yeah, it's very interesting that that's never clarified in any way. Like, I personally think that it's Radagon. Like, to me, that just makes sense, but I feel like the red hair is a dead giveaway. Yeah, people do have different theories about, you know, who the father may or may not be. Yeah, the second phase is very, very crazy. There's a lot of giant snakes. And it's very weird because the giant snake attacks are very like erratic and kind of hard to read, but I seemingly don't have that much trouble dodging them, which is really interesting. They are very, very cool. And overall, this boss fight is just really, really, really fun. And my only issue is that maybe it'll be different when I do it a second time, but the first time that I fought Mesmer, he did not seem to have a ton of health, which maybe if he had more, it would be a lot more annoying and less fun, but I'll be interested to see. It's not really a mark against the boss, but it's just something that I noticed on my first time playing the game. Maybe using some different weapons that will be less notable. You know, the boss fight will be more normal. But yeah, for his rewards, you get his spear, which is, I don't think his spear is actually very good. Now, I don't know, like statistically, I have no idea, but like using it, I didn't particularly like using it. It's very slow, and the strong attacks or the charge attacks are replaced with throwing the weapon, which is, you know, it's cool, but it doesn't do a lot of damage, and it's way slower if you fully charge it, which is the only worthwhile thing to do with the throwing attacks. It's so much slower that it's not worth doing like up close like you would with a regular charge attack. So the weapon is cool, but I don't think it's very good. And then the other boss thing you get is the fireball dunk incantation, which I think is pretty good. But where do I want to put Mesmer? I think I'm going to put Mesmer up here in front of Placidus X. Again, I have a lot more experience fighting Rykard and the Radabeast fight and the Lion Dancer, now that I think about it. So on the initial, just the first fight, I think he's really good. And, you know, maybe he might move up or down depending on how I feel when I find him again. But I think I'm pretty comfortable putting him here in the top. He's just a really good boss all around. I have almost like 3 hours of footage. This is gonna be such a pain in the ass to edit. Yeah, the next boss we have is Meteor, Mother of Fingers, and this boss is really cool, but I don't particularly find... I've only fought it once, but it didn't particularly leave that much of a lasting impression. I find the lore about the boss much more interesting than the actual boss fight itself. You know, being the first shooting star in the Lands Between, and the first sort of envoy sent by the Greater Will. You know, it's responsible for the existence of the Two Fingers and the Finger Creepers, and ostensibly the entirety of the whole events of the main game. You know, it being broken and not actually receiving information from the Greater Will and sort of just going off of like vibes, and basically the entirety of the events of the game being a lie and just shit that Meteor made up seemingly is interesting to say the least. But yeah, the actual boss fight I think it's fine. I don't hate it or anything. I don't think it's particularly hard either, but this is a very similar boss to Ebrietas or Ebrietas, however you want to say it, from Bloodborne. It has this very like similar setup where you see this weird fucking thing in the corner of this giant blue room, and it's a giant fucking alien. It spawns ads during the boss fight, which is kind of lame and annoying, although it makes sense. You know, it's literally giving birth to more finger creepers. And its second phase, when it has the microcosm in between its like spiraling fingers on its tail, I guess you could call it, is really cool. And the one attack where it has goes up into the air and like has 2 giant rotating lasers coming out of a black hole is really cool. But yeah, besides that, I was kind of expecting it to do like way more crazy alien fantastical shit, but besides the lasers, that's kind of it. You know, it summons ads. It has like a spin attack. It has a ground wave, and it can shoot tiny eye lasers, and that's about it. Again, I find the lore about this boss way more interesting than the actual boss fight itself. Yeah, I'm gonna put it at the bottom of B because I don't particularly care for the boss fight. I don't think it's actually bad or annoying like these two down here. Although it's going at the bottom of a B because it also has that annoying attack that the giant finger creepers do, where they like scurry across the ground and it's just a giant hitbox. I hate that shit. Although one really cool thing about the boss, actually, it's OST. I believe in the second phase, it's just this like really constant like white noise, or more specifically, I think it's literally like the recorded sound of what a black hole sounds like. It's just like this really ominous low humming noise, which is interesting because multiple times throughout the boss fight, it has like a black hole in some of its attacks, and when you kill it, it like gets sucked into a black hole. It's really, really cool. All right, and next we have one of my favorite bosses in the entire DLC, Midra, Lord of Frenzied Flame. I'm going to put him right behind the Dancing Lion because I've only fought Midra once and I've fought the Lion Beast twice so far. But I'm a huge mark for Frenzied Flame anything. The Frenzied Flame ending in the vanilla game was the first one that I did just because I was super into the aesthetic of like the whole like yellow madness, fire lightning shit. Also, can somebody explain to me why the frenzied spells sound like lightning, but it's fire? It's not split damage, right? It is just fire. Why does it sound like lightning? Anyways, so yeah, the whole lore surrounding Midra and, you know, the Inquisition and Nanaya is really, really cool. I kind of wish there was a little bit more explanation about things like the 3 fingers and stuff like that. But, you know, what is there is cool. The boss looks super, super cool. And, you know, having the giant frenzied flame head with the yellow cloth flowing around him is really, really cool. It's very King in Yellow vibes, which is
probably super intentional, but yeah, just mechanically, I think the boss fight is really, really cool. Although it is kind of annoying that you have to kill like tiny old man Midra every single time. But yeah, I think this is probably one of the most fair old style Dark Souls bosses. It's like it's not super fast. In fact, it's quite slow. He has a lot of like flowing, like swinging attacks and things like that, in addition to like shooting frenzy out of his face and stuff like that. And his OST is so good. It fits so well with the boss. Also, his cutscene at the beginning is really, really good, especially that really weird, like ominous noise that plays when at the end of the cutscene where his like head gets like really big. Or like the flames getting really big. I really like that part. Yeah, overall, I don't really have anything specific to say about like his attacks or anything. Like mechanically in the boss fight, it's really fun and good. The arena is also super sick. It catches on fire in the second phase when he like does the big dive bomb. And his rewards, I won't lie, I don't particularly care for either of the boss things that you get. The Great Sword of Damnation, it's fine. It's a generic Great Sword moveset. And the sword looks really cool, and it has a really cool weapon art that is really useful for like NPCs or PvP. I kind of wish it was something just straight up frenzy related, but it's not. But it's still cool. And then the incantation that you get is you summon a giant frenzied flame head, and it spits frenzied flame bolts out of it. It's kind of similar to the other spells that do that, except instead of coming out of your face, it's coming out of like above your head. And it's bad. It's very, very not good. The only thing that it's actually good at is proccing madness very fast. But yeah, I find the rewards from his boss fight kind of lacking. But the biggest travesty of this boss fight is not the lack of abundant frenzied flame lore that is new. It is not the sort of lackluster, to me personally, boss weapons and incantations. It is the fact that still, the second time we see somebody with a frenzied flame head, it is not a obtainable helmet for the player character. Like, why? Why would you do this? I'm pretty sure people have modded this. Maybe it's something that was in the files, or maybe it's something that somebody made from scratch. I don't actually know, but I'm pretty sure I've seen it where people have gotten the frenzied flame like helmet head model, and it's something that you can like equip. Like, if I have one request from Software, add one more thing, it would be a equipable frenzied flame head. It would look so cool. But yeah, overall, despite those complaints, some of those more worthwhile than others, yeah, Midra is still one of the best bosses in the entire DLC. I think he's really, really cool. All right, and next we have probably the single most iconic, memeable thing from the entire Elden Ring DLC. Bale the Dread. Where do I want to put Bale? Let me talk about him really quick first. So, Bale, just not even getting into the boss fight first, the whole Egon questline and the whole lead up walking up Dragon Peak and all the weather and everything is really, really cool. It's very atmospheric. It's metal as shit, literally orange fire lightning everywhere as the weather gets more and more severe the further to the peak that you get. And the entirety of Egon's character, all of his dialogue is all so iconic. It's so iconic that people are making edits of Bale's theme with Egon's dialogue specifically in it, and Bale's lore specifically with not only with Egon but with also his relationship to Placidusax, and you know, the betrayal and the death match that they seemingly had with one another. You know, on if you look closely at Bale's model, I'm pretty sure a bunch of people already know this, but you can see, I think it's one of or two of Placidusax's heads like biting onto Bale's back, and they're still there. It's very, very cool bit of visual storytelling. And you know, beyond that, obviously Bale is very, very fucked up and mangled. He's missing both of his legs and one of his arms. I think Bale got the raw end of that battle with Placidusax, you know, missing heads notwithstanding. But yeah, the whole spectacle of Bale's boss fight is just, I think Bale is the best dragon boss fight that they've made in a Souls game. And up until the DLC came out, I would have given that to Placidusax. So it's funny that my two favorite dragon fights in a Souls game both come from Elden Ring. But I think Bale's fight, no, with all the like atmosphere and the lore and Egon and everything like that surrounding it, and the OST is amazing. But all of his moves, especially in the second phase, he has this like, he also has like a Gojira laser where he'll fly across the arena and shoot it, and then he'll like rear up, and then it'll get quiet, and then the screen will shake as he shoots another one and flies across the screen. Like the very specific like cadence of his laser is really, really, I love it so much.
Such as it is, this battle could not be more fitting. for the birth of a new god and the coming of a lord.
Obviously, he also has kind of a nuke, although it's not as like visually obvious. He does sort of like a giant explosion as well, and it has that same like tinnitus, like a ringing noise afterwards. I don't think it's nearly as big. I might be wrong, but yeah, the transition from the first and second phase where he, you know, explodes and then sprouts a giant pair of wings and starts flying is very, very cool. Along with the music transition and summoning Egon in the boss fight and having him speak in the boss fight. A lot of the NPCs do that if you summon them. The Horn Scent for Mesmer and Egon for Bale, I know, are the two that do that. And it's really, really cool for Egon, a true Drake warrior, and Egon, I will riddle with holes your rotten hide, etc., etc. Just, I think everything that they did surrounding, you know, the area and the NPCs and the lore and the boss fight itself just like all comes together to bring about one of the most like memorable, not just boss fights, but like experiences in a Souls game that they've ever made. So I think he's gonna go in the triple S, but where do I put him? I think I have to put him here. I really like the Divine Lion, but I think everything surrounding Bale, even outside of the boss fight, like just elevates it to a level above everything else in this tier. I haven't even talked about his rewards yet, which are both pretty good from what I remember. Obviously, there are two incantations that require arcane, and one is a giant slam down with a bone hand like Bale has, and it is a shit ton of damage because it does like 3 types of split damage. And the other one is the Bale's Roar, which also does a ton of damage to a single target because the way the Roar works, it only hits one target at a time. It's very stupid, but it still does decent damage. So moving on to the penultimate boss, we have Ramana, Saint of the Bud, and I do really like this fight. This is one of those fights kind of like Midra. Now Midra has a lot of health, so his fight lasts a little bit longer, but I don't think Ramana has as much health, and she's a sort of like slower, almost Dark Souls style boss as opposed to the rest of the Elden Ring bosses. So I feel like I haven't had a decent chance to fully experience her fight, although I feel like I've seen for the most part everything that she does. But yeah, nothing about her fight is like super unfair or anything. All of her attacks are very well telegraphed, and you know, visually she looks really cool. It's you know, calling back to the Quelaag, you know, half bug, half hot lady thing they did in DS1, and you know, DS2 kind of did that with Najka, but it was not nearly as cool. And it was kind of lame, I'm not gonna lie. But it is interesting that she is also like half scorpion in this, like in DS2. Although obviously here it's related to the god of rot, and you know, the Scarlet Rot god, or at least an aspect of it, I believe is a giant scorpion, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong, but it's interesting because she's like 2 bugs. You know, the back half is the scorpion and the front half is like a centipede. But yeah, her moveset is for the most part pretty fair. Although she like will bundle up and roll around sometimes, which is very funny. I don't know why the scorpions in the Elden Ring DLC roll around, but I'm not Miyazaki, so but yeah, the lore surrounding Ramana is very scarce, and there's not a lot of it. You know, she was a victim of Mesmer and Marka's crusade. After whatever church she was in was burned to the ground, along with like Bellarat and everything, she discovered a divine medium that she weaved into the Scarlet Rot. So seemingly something to do with mass amounts of physical suffering allows the Scarlet Rot god to manifest in people. But yeah, there's just this interesting lore bit about the butterflies, where something I don't remember specifically what it is, but the Melania's butterflies without like a master, so to speak, because I guess it's implied that you fought Melania already by this point. So since the butterflies have like no master, so to speak, she sort of takes them in, and I don't remember what the line specifically is, but it references Melania's butterflies specifically, which is really interesting. But yeah, her music is also really good. It shares a leitmotif or leitmotif, I don't know how you pronounce it, with Melania's theme, which is super cool. It's almost like that's the leitmotif of the outer god of rot, and it's present in both of these bosses' themes. Obviously they have to do with like the Scarlet Rot and everything. It's very, very cool. Overall, I do really like this fight and this boss, you know, and the little bit of lore that we do get. This is one of the bosses, along with Rallana, that has cut dialogue. It's a single line, but yeah, I feel like with Rallana and Ramana, you know, a cutscene and some dialogue probably would have helped flesh out these characters a little bit more. So it is a shame that, you know, she and Rallana don't have any of that. But yeah, for her rewards, I believe you get her glaive, which is actually pretty good, and you get the spell that summons a bunch of scarlet rot butterflies that all explode. And I don't think the spell is particularly good, but I mean, it looks pretty, so fuck it. So where do I want to put Ramana? I do really like her fight, and it's not very hard, which might or may not be a bad thing. You know, you might blast through the boss without actually experiencing half of it. But I'm gonna put Ramana at the right before Moog. I don't think she's challenging enough to warrant a higher rank, but at the same time, she's not like unfair in any way, so swings and roundabouts, I guess. But I do like her more than Rolana or any of these other bosses. I don't think she's quite S ranked though, is the thing. I think my favorite thing though is the shared leitmotif with Melania's OST. It's very, very cool. And we finally have reached the end, the final Remembrance boss, the 26th, 5th? I don't know how to count. It's been like 3 hours of recording this, but the final Remembrance boss of not only the DLC, but Elden Ring as a whole. We have Miquella and his promised consort, Radahn. So I'm just gonna say it in terms of pure mechanically and the gameplay. I do not particularly like this boss. It's very similar to Melania, where there's like 1 or 2 things that I feel push this boss past the point of being really, really hard but fair and just being not fun to do. In fact, I'm pretty sure Promised Consort Radahn is the only boss in the whole DLC that I summoned real people for, just because I wanted it to be over and done with. And it basically comes down to 2 things. So the entire first phase of Radahn's fight is fair for the most part. I do find it dodging his meteor attack is kind of inconsistent, at least for me personally. I know you're supposed to like run away and then run to the side, but sometimes it still hits me. It's very, maybe I'm just doing something wrong, but yeah, for the most part, the first phase is good. It's not unfair in any egregious way, although I'm pretty sure he has his attack in phase 1 and phase 2, I believe, where he does a slash and then immediately does another slash as part of like a 3-hit combo. So it'll be like slash and then another slash, and that's really, really hard to dodge unless you dodge, like, I think specifically to his right leg or to your left, which that's kind of like he's swinging so fast that if you were to just try and dodge normally as fast as you could, you would still get hit by it unless you're dodging to a specific spot. It's very annoying and unfun to deal with, but that's the one attack in his entire first phase that I feel like for the most part, even with that, it's still fine. And interesting that his second phase triggers at 1/3 and not 1/2 health. Maybe they wanted the second phase to be way longer, but yeah, also the reveal, I should talk about this. So the whole reveal about Radahn being the final boss is some people have issue with that, and especially if you don't do the NPC quest lines in the DLC. I feel like, yeah, if you just get to the DLC and you just fight the bosses and maybe explore a little bit, you know, not talking to any of the NPCs or doing their quests, it comes out of left field if you're not doing those things, you know, especially in the storehouse where it's very spelled out and like blatant that, you know, Radahn is related to Miquella's whole deal and Moog in the Shadowlands. You know, Ansbach and Freya, you know, you run around the specimen storehouse a little bit and they both basically lay it out that Moog was charmed by Miquella, and Miquella basically dies being ripped out of the Halig tree so that he can go to the Shadowlands, because that's where all death converges and whatever. Radahn also has to die so that his soul can go there, and then you come along and kill Moog so that they can use his body and then to put his soul into there so then he can become Miquella's consort, because in order to become a god, you have to have a consort that was established in the main game. And again, if you don't do the quest lines, that comes out of left field, but again, they really do spell it out for you plain as day if you do their quest lines, which I would highly recommend, because it's not on this, but the NPC boss fight, or like the NPC free-for-all that happens before Radahn, if you do all the NPC quests, you know, I think it's a very cool encounter. A lot of people don't really like NPC fights, and neither do I. However, when you have really cool and interesting dialogue being exchanged between characters, and you know, it's not like a gank fight against you only, you know, you do have help with Ansbach and Tolier. I think that is a really cool encounter, despite how chaotic it can be sometimes. But yeah, the whole reveal with Radahn, I think I definitely wanted the final boss to be Godwyn, and I feel like a lot of people also wanted that, especially with the vanilla game, you know, hinting at Miquella wanting to revive Godwyn's soul, you know, with the whole Eclipse shit. And I'm not sure if he wanted to revive Godwyn so that he could be his consort, or whether he just really liked his brother, because it's never stated that there was ever any kind of vow like that between Godwyn and Miquella, and it's shown to us, really far in the past that there was a vow made between Miquella and Radahn. So I feel like Miquella wouldn't be like the type of person to make multiple vows like that with different people. So I think he might have just wanted to revive Godwyn because Godwyn was a cool guy. But yeah, moving past the whole reveal, the cutscene that happens when you first enter the boss fight, I think is really cool. Miquella addresses you, and I'm pretty sure Leda, he says, "My loyal blade and champion of the festival." So I don't know if he's only referring to you or you and Leda. I'm not sure. But yeah, that cutscene with, my lord's brother is returns or whatever he says. And the slow build up of Radahn's music as it's slowly being revealed. That's who it is very, I think it's really cool. And of course, because Radahn is a goober, he has to do the story trailer thing where he pulls the two swords and crosses over his own face. It's a really cool shot, and I like it a lot. And I should mention this because I'm probably gonna forget because it's like 3 a.m. But the OST for the first phase and the second phase, I'm just gonna say it now, is amazing. It's like one of the coolest songs in the whole game, and it very similar to DS3 actually. It is they use the secret quote unquote final boss music as the trailer music that everybody hears, but nobody knows it's the final boss because they don't show the final boss in the trailer, obviously. And they did that with Gale's theme in PS3. But yeah, the second phase, getting to that, and my grievances with this boss is the second phase is really where that starts to peek through for me personally. I should say that visually, the second phase with Miquella, grasping onto Radahn's back and having the multiple arms is really, really cool looking. It's very calling back to Lorien and Lothric, but also it is a reverse mirror of Godfrey and Siraj, where the divine lion is the main warrior dude, and the person is the one grasping onto the back. It's very cool, the parallel and mirroring of that. Also, the horn scent, this is completely off topic, but talking about the lore, I think is really cool. The horn scent worshiping these like divine beast lion creatures, and then coming to the present day where that is ironically manifesting as Radahn being the divine lion god is really, really cool. It's very curious because it brings in the question, like, what is the deal with Siraj and being like a lion beast thing that is also related to Godfrey and the Crucible is related to the horn scent. What is the deal with all that? But regardless, I'm rambling. But yeah, moving on to the second phase, I feel like is where a lot of my issues with this boss fight lies. He has pretty much all of the same moves as he does in the first phase. He's just as aggressive as he's in the first phase, except with the addition, I don't know if it's every single swing, but it feels like every single swing. In addition to just all of his regular attacks, after most of his swings, he has the addition of light pillar AoEs that strike the ground whenever he swings. And for me personally, I feel like that's my biggest grievance with the second phase, because not only is he still just as aggressive and does just as much damage as he did in the first phase, and the addition of the covering of what used to be potential openings, or at least escapes, are now being covered by these light pillars. And it's just, one, it's very visually obscuring, not only with that, but also Miquella's hair, which I don't really have a problem with, but all these things combining makes it very difficult to tell what the fuck Radahn is doing. And it also causes what might be a hit or two to be multiple more hits, or just straight up death most of the time if you're not dodging these things correctly. And some of his other attacks that he does get in the second phase, like all the light clone shadow images that I think visually look really cool and I think are really cool, but yeah, if you don't dodge them in this very specific way, you will get hit and you will probably die. And sometimes the way to dodge it, there is a way to do it, but sometimes if you're not super experienced with it, it feels very inconsistent to try and dodge. But one cool thing in the second phase that Miquella / Radahn has is a command grab where basically, Radahn will grab you and then hold you up to Miquella, and then Miquella will charm you. And then if he does that twice in a row, he will you will die, but you don't actually die. You get charmed by Miquella and you swear fealty to him, and it pretty much acts as a death. The game reloads and you spawn outside the boss room. But it's very cool because I think it even has a unique message. It says heart stolen instead of you died. And he has unique dialogue whenever he grabs you. It's very, very cool, very similar to Ranni's dialogue in her ending. But yeah, I think the second phase is, I feel like I might be forgetting something else, but the second phase is where a lot of my issues lie. The boss, in terms of the gameplay, and it's to the point where I did not have fun fighting the boss. Again, I only fought it once, so maybe my opinion will change if I fight it again like I did with Rolana, but we'll have to see. Again, I think the lore surrounding the boss with Radahn and Miquella specifically is really, really interesting, especially with how Miquella seemingly wants to rid himself of everything about his lineage and Marika and what she did, but in doing so, he's literally like mirroring Marika and falling for the same pitfalls that she did. Now, I don't think Miquella committed mass atrocities against an entire group of people, but you know, getting rid of his love and things like that when he's supposed to be a god of compassion. A ghost literally is like, how can you be compassionate if you get rid of your love or something along those lines? You know, he got rid of something that he shouldn't have. It's very, very cool. And speaking of lore stuff, if you do the NPC quests, you can have Ansbach and Tolier help you in the final boss, which is very cool. It sucks because it often jacks the boss's health up so much that it's almost not worth it. And in fact, I don't think it is. And not only that, but they will more than likely not survive the entire boss fight, which might be intentional. You know, I've stated my piece about what I think about the gameplay of this boss fight. But talking about the rewards, you get a few things actually from this boss fight. One, you get a circlet that Miquella is wearing, which I think all it does is gives you like bonus stats, which is very kind of underwhelming, but you get a pretty tiara crown thing, so that's cool, I guess. But you also get Radahn's new but old armor, and the lore on it is very interesting. I won't get into it here. This has already been going on long enough, but there are two versions of the paired greatswords that he uses, which I feel like is kind of weird. I feel like they could have just mapped the two different weapon art attacks to weapon art and then R1 and R2. Like there could have been like a strong and a light weapon art attack, but they separated it into two different weapons anyways. I'm not really sure why. Yeah, they both kind of suck. Although the one where you do the big super long combo is apparently decent in PvP from what I've seen. And then Miquella's giant orbital laser nuke, which I didn't mention, he does at the beginning of the second phase, is yeah, that thing sucks from what I remember seeing, unless you use it on like Deathbirds or Ghost Dragons, but everything wholly kills those things instantly, so who gives a fuck? But yeah, where am I gonna put Radahn? I did mention he's very similar to Melania, where I feel like a few changes and he would be a really, really good boss fight. I feel like the bar was set so high, not only with the other DLC bosses, but with like Gale as being an end cap DLC boss. You know, Gale is like, he's hard. I don't think Gale is actually hard, but he's hard, but he's also really fair. Nothing he does is like super bullshit, and I feel like there is enough bullshit in Radahn's fight that it detracts from the fun of the fight for me personally. So I think I'll put Radahn here. I do think Radahn is a cooler fight than Fortisax, Morgott, Godric, even Melania, but again, he would probably be way higher if the things that I mentioned earlier did not detract from my fun as much. And you know, maybe he's higher for you because you're good at the game and you don't have as much trouble as I did. But yeah, again, maybe my opinion will change once I fight him again. I've only fought him once, but yeah, with all that said and done, finally, this is gonna be so stupid and long to edit. Hopefully my computer doesn't crash trying to render this video because it's been doing that lately, so that's fun. But with all that said and done, I think I'm gonna finally go ahead and end the video there. If for whatever reason you enjoyed me rambling about Elden Ring bosses and stupid shit like that for the past God knows how long, leaving a like on the video and subscribing would be very much appreciated. I'm not sure how often I'm gonna do this. This was just sort of a off the cuff, like random thing that I wanted to do, and I'm not really sure what else I would do this on. I don't want to make doing this like brain dead like content or whatever, but if there's like specific things I want to talk about or whatever, then maybe I'll do this for other stuff. I need to replay through Demon Souls because I didn't finish it, so once I do that, I will be eligible, so to say, to rank all of the Souls-born games, because Demon Souls is the last one that I have not finished yet, so that might be fun to do at some point whenever I decide I want to do that. But yeah, I'm gonna end the video now, and Cry has edited this like 3 hours of footage. This took way longer than I thought it was going to. I didn't think I had this much to say about all these bosses, but to be fair, there's like 26 of them, so anyways, later.